Hello YouTube, Dave here again. It's been a long time coming, but I am finally going to get around to doing my D&D Basic Rule Set Buyer's Guide video. So a little bit of a backstory. Last year I did a series of Buyer's Guides for the previous editions of Dungeons & Dragons, and the idea behind the series was for people that wanted to go back and play the earlier versions of the game. This wasn't, something for people who wanted to necessarily collect seriously for each of the editions, but just a few things to pick up if you actually wanted to sit down and just play a game or two, or even do a small campaign using previous sets of rules. So when I first did that series, I glossed over the D&D Basic rule set because I didn't own anything aside from like the master rules. I think I had them at that point in time. I since sold them to a friend of mine who didn't have them, but I didn't have like the basic rules. I didn't have the expert or anything other than that, so I really don't like to talk about things that I don't have. Before I start, I should go over a little bit of the history of the basic sets for D&D. So there's been several different ones that have come out over the years, and there are three majorly different types, especially early on. Now I think that during the days of second edition Dungeons & Dragons, they put out what was called the black box, and I honestly don't know much about that, so I don't really want to talk about that one, but I'll talk about some of the earliest versions of the D&D basic rules before I sort of get into my buyer's guide. So the first set of D&D basic rules is generally referred to as the Holmes Basic. And the Holmes Basic was like the cover has, I think it was like sort of like a blue cover, like blue and white art if I recall correctly, but it had like a dragon sitting on its hoard. That version was not meant to be a standalone rule set, unlike the ones that sort of came after it. So the Holmes Basic was essentially designed to clean up the rule set from the first three booklets of the original D&D box sets, so the ones that came in like the white box or the wood grain box, like the Men and Monsters, Monsters and Treasures, and Wilderness, and the first three books anyway. I can't remember the exact name of all three off the top of my head. So it basically cleaned up those rules and had a system for players to make characters from levels 1 through 3. And it was really meant to serve as sort of a bridge between the original Dungeons & Dragons and Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition, which was either out at the time or just coming out. Again, my history on it's a little bit sketchy, so I don't want to say for sure where it came out, but I think it came out prior to and then directed people towards the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons rules. Not 100% on that, but that was its original purpose anyway, was to close the gap between the original D&D, make it a little bit easier to understand and play, and then sort of promote the AD&D rule set. The next set of basic rules that came out is generally referred to as the Moldvay Basic. And there was like the Moldvay Basic, and then I think there was the Cook Expert rules. So I think there were two different authors that did the basic rules and then the expert rule set. And that was the first version of the D&D basic rules that was meant to be sort of its own standalone game, its own standalone rule set. It was the first version to have the races of elf, dwarf, and I think halfling was in there too, be their own class progression instead of just being a race and then adding a class on top of it. So there were only the two rule sets put out for that. The basic rules, which again ran for levels 1 through 3, and then there was the expert rules, which I want to say was levels 4 through 14 or 16. But that's as far as that line went. And then finally, there was the Menser D&D. So the Menser D&D was eventually released over a series of 5 box sets. So you had Basic, Expert, Companion, Master, and then you finally had the Immortal rules. Basic was levels 1 through 3 once again, so that was kind of consistent throughout all 3 different types. Then Expert covered the same level range as the Cook Basic, or the Cook Expert, or Moldvay Cook Expert rules, and then the Companion ones I think went up to like level 21 or 24 4. I don't know the exact level range, but anyway, the Master rule set went up to level 36, and then you had the Immortal rules, which was kind of like Epic level, if you're familiar with that from like 3rd edition D&D, except you've surpassed conventional leveling, and it had sort of its own set of rules. The Mentor D&D is also generally referred to as the BECMI D&D, or the BECMI for Basic Expert Master, Basic Expert Companion Master and Immortals. And it was also the version of the D&D Basic rules that was condensed into the D&D Rules Cyclopedia, which is what you see in front of you here. So it's sort of a little bit of a brief history. The Immortal rules were not covered really in the D&D Rules Cyclopedia. Another box set was put out called Wrath of the Immortals, and it sort of cleaned up the Immortal rules and made them a little bit more playable from my understanding, but I've never looked at the Immortal rules for either set. So for this buyer's guide, like I said, I want to focus on just some of the things that you need to just sit down and start playing a game, a couple of games, or even a short campaign, or even something that could last you a couple of years. Now, I've had a great deal of difficulty finding the genuine articles from the D&D Basic rule sets in the area that I live in, so I'm not going to focus too heavily on those. I actually want to focus kind of heavily on the items that are made available through DM's Guild print-on-demand service, because that way you don't have to try to find them in the wild, and some of the prices can be pretty ridiculous overall. For example, the Rule Cyclopedia, so this is one of the genuine Rule Cyclopedias, which was actually sent to me by a viewer, which still blows me away, but I've seen this book listed online for several $100s. So if you're curious and you just want to go and try playing some of this style of D&D, and you want physical items to have, if you're like me and you like physical items, I don't recommend trying to find a original copy of the Rule Cyclopedia, because they get really, really expensive. So I'm just going to sort of set this off to the side. And so like I said, most of what I'm going to show is stuff that's available through print on demand. But let's just go ahead and start right with, and I'll talk about a few print-on-demand items as well that I don't have, but I think might be worth looking into as you go down the road. But the first thing, obviously, is going to be what I had shown just a few seconds ago, but this is the print-on-demand version of the D&D Rules Cyclopedia. And honestly, I could just say all you need is this book and end the video here, but I'll throw in a few other things as well. This is a genuine all-in-one rule set. So this has all the player information that you need, the DM information that you need. It has like the monsters manuals and stuff included in it, and it also has campaign setting information included as well. The D&D Basic rule set from this era takes place in the world of Mystara, or Mystara. It's a made-up name, so I'm not too worried about the precise pronunciations. But it actually has maps of the locations as well as some basic write-up on some of the locations. So you actually even have the setting itself that you can use, and this even includes the Hollow World. So you've got the map here for the world of Mystara, but just a few pages later, or maybe I already completely missed it, but it also has Hollow World, which takes place within the core of Mystara, basically. And it's a really cool setting as well. There's the Hollow World. So you have the two different locations to explore in, and like I said, you can get this through print on demand. You don't have to get the hardcover. There is a softcover version as well. But in my opinion, this is the best route to go if you want to play the D&D Basic rule set. You can try to find the like the Moldvay version, but Moldvay and the Mentor versions are very similar. I think it's just the way that the things were described, or the phrases and terminology used was slightly different, but the overall rules were the same. And as far as I know, you can pretty much use the Moldvay Basic with like the Mentor Expert and like so on. So they are very similar as far as I know. I think there's like minor differences again, but this is the route that I would recommend. And if you're into PDFs, if you don't want the physical items, they do have the Moldvay versions as well as the complete set of the Mentor box sets available for PDF download through DM's Guild as well. So that's available to you as well, but I'm going to focus on the physical items, and this is the very first thing that I would recommend. This is the most important thing if you want to go back and play this version of Dungeons & Dragons. So now that we have the rules and we have a bunch of the monsters, really the next thing that I would recommend would be some adventures. Um, so there's quite a few classic adventures that came out during this era, and I'm going to show a few different options for them. But one of the first ones is one of the most classic and iconic adventures in all of D&D's history, and that is Keep on the Borderlands adventure or dungeon module B2. So this was designed again with the basic rules in mind. This version came out in 1980, but it was reprinted several different times. And again, this is one of the more iconic ones, exploring the Caves of Chaos, which was a bit of a meat grinder because this version of D&D was not for the weak at heart. So you could basically don't want to get too attached to your low-level characters until you end up leveling them up, at least to the point where it's not going to be as easy for them to die. But this was an absolutely excellent adventure, and of course you got the good old-fashioned hobgoblins there, complete with red skin and blue noses, for whatever reason. Alright, so we have our Keep on the Borderlands. However, through print on demand, there's actually what I consider to be an even better option for having some adventures for the D&D Basic rule set, and that is getting the compilation book B1 through B9, In Search of Adventure. So this book basically compiles the best aspects of the first 9 adventures in the B series. Overall, there were 12, I think, modules in the B series complete, but this has like the aspects from the first 9. And what's even cooler about this one is it actually breaks them down into various campaign arcs. So you can actually go through, and you don't play through all 9 adventures when you go through it, but you kind of have, and I think there's a flow chart here. I'll just see if I can find that really quick. So there's essentially there's sort of an opening event, and then you have different routes that you can take depending on like choices that are made or leads that are followed up on or the things that the DM kind of wants to go through. So you can kind of see which modules that you would go for there. So this is the one that I would really recommend over getting a single individual module, because you can get months of play out of this book versus, you know, a few weeks of play out of just a single module. So for your money, I consider this to be a very, very great value. One thing though about this compilation book, even though it says it's B1 through B9, it really doesn't feature much of module B1. B1 was In Search of the Unknown. So what the In Search of Adventure has is it has the map for the dungeon that's included here. But it doesn't have any of the room descriptions, it doesn't have any of the monster charts or anything like that. So if you do get if you do get the compilation B1 through B9, you may want to consider getting In Search of the Unknown as well. And the biggest reason that I say that is it just gives a lot of really great room descriptions. You know, some great information there. But what's interesting about this is an adventure that is sort of a blank slate. So it gives you the background of the location, it gives you the description of the areas and the rooms and things like that, but you have to actually populate the dungeon yourself as the dungeon master. It gives you the lists of enemies that you can choose from, and you can like do random encounters, or you could like strategically kind of plan them out, but it's something that you have to do ahead of time. This was meant to be an introductory module, and it's also sort of a tutorial on dungeon design and like stocking dungeons with monsters, and I think it's actually a really, really cool idea. I'd like to see sort of more along, you know, more things sort of this nature to help you kind of get your head around doing this sort of stuff yourself. And I think it's a really great way to go about it. And because, again, none of this information is really contained in B1 through B9 other than the maps, then I consider this to be sort of an important pickup as well if you want to use the sidetrack for this particular adventure. Alright, so one last adventure, and I don't know if this one's actually available print on demand off the top of my head, but once you start getting into some higher levels, so once you get past level 3, or once you reach level 3, most of these books don't really cover that any further. You could modify some of the adventures if you want in the compilation book, but you also may just want to move right on, and a great way to do that is to pick up X1. the Isle of Dread. So this adventure was the one that came with the original expert rules, or was designed for the original expert rules, and is for characters of levels 3 through 7. Now there are quite a few of the X series modules available print on demand, so if they don't have this one, there are others as well. Just kind of check the level range and make sure that it fits the level of party that you intend to run through. But this again is another one of those iconic D&D adventures, and if you get the chance to pick it up, I do recommend it, especially if you want to play beyond just the first few levels of progression. Alright, so beyond that, there's a couple of accessories that I would also recommend. So the first I'm going to talk about are the ones that I don't have in my collection at this point in time, because I would rather end the video showing things that I actually own rather than things that I don't. So if you really start getting into this rule set and you want to expand your worlds further, there are several what are referred to as gazetteers that you can get either PDFs for, or there are a few of them that are available through print on demand. Currently sitting in my cart on DM's Guild, just waiting to earn enough credit to get it and have it shipped without having to spend any money on it, is one for the Shadow Elves, which is kind of like the Drow in the D&D Basic setting in the world of Mystara. But they are, again, slightly different. But there's all kinds of, most of the regions had a gazetteer as well. So, like, for example, if you get B1 through B9, it does recommend getting the gazetteer of Karamikos, I think is how that's pronounced, Karamikos. It's not available print on demand at this point in time, but they do have the PDF for it if you're looking to get that. You don't need it to run this, but it is something that is worth picking up. There's also a monster supplement called, I can't remember the number of it, but it focuses on giants and dragons. So if you like giants and you like dragons and you want to have more options for those, it's something that may be worth picking up as well. Finally, they also have, and this is available for print on demand, they have the Hollow World campaign setting, as well as several adventures that take place in Hollow World if you wanted to get those. So that may be worth picking up as well. So the last couple of things again are accessories, and the first one that I'm going to show is probably not the most essential, but I think it's kind of one of the coolest, and it can be really handy actually if you just want to pick up and start running a game right away. And that is accessory 1, AC1, the Dungeons & Dragons, the Shady Dragon Inn. So what this has is over 100 pre-generated characters, and their stat blocks are pretty basic, but it gives you a little bit of a write-up on them. It gives you the pertinent information that you need for them. You can kind of fill in the character sheet that comes in the rule cyclopedia with that information, and fill in any of the stuff that's missing if you need to. But what's really cool about this, again, it's just you've got a ton of characters that you can just pluck right out of the book and start running with. Or as a DM, you can also turn these into potential encounters. This book also includes the characters created for the LJN Dungeons & Dragons toy line as well. So you have things like Warduke and Kellic, the evil wizard, Skyla, Raven, and then you also have the heroic ones like Strongheart and characters like that. So it also gives you some information if you want to create like mixed parties, and it also gives you a complete map of the Shady Dragon Inn if you want to use that as a base of operations. So it's a really, really cool product. Now, the print-on-demand one, it prints the individual sections of the map as their own pages rather than having the pull-out map. But you can also get the PDF version along with the physical for only like $1 or something more. And that way you can go to a print shop, print them off, or print them off from your own printer and just sort of stitch them together. But this is something that, again, it's not necessarily essential, but it is a cool thing to have. And if you're looking to just pick up and play a game, having these pre-made characters ready to go might not be a bad thing. So there's that. And the last thing, if you start getting more and more into the game and you want to start designing your own adventures, the last thing that I'm going to recommend in this video is the Dungeons & Dragons Creature Catalog. So this is meant to work directly alongside of the D&D Rules Cyclopedia. In fact, as you can see, it even has like the same exact logo. So this just has a bunch of new monsters in it, and new monsters is always a good thing. This is actually the book that has the Shadow Elves in it. There's also another type of beholder that has the Nagpa, I think it's called, which is like the vulture-like humanoid, which you had in the arcade games. What is Shadows over Mystara? You know, they had one of those as one of the major villains in there. So just again, a really cool assortment of monsters. And having more monsters is usually, you know, nothing but a good thing. This also has like the Undead Dragon is in here versus the Rule Cyclopedia. So it really goes well with the Rule Cyclopedia if you want to start creating your own adventures and having your own monsters to sort of stock it and populate it. So anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you enjoyed. And there's definitely other products as well that I could definitely, that maybe not I could recommend because I don't know a whole lot about them because I don't have them or haven't read them. But if you've played a lot of the basic D&D, certainly leave some suggestions in the comments below as well. Again, remember the point of this video isn't to build up like a collection necessarily. It's not the things that are the rarest or most difficult to find or the most valuable. It's the things that you should try to keep in mind to pick up if you want to run through, if you want to play this version of the game, if you want to run it. Or if you like want to actually sort of start to build a serious campaign from there. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time. Take care.